with Assad's regime's gone, the new the new government, new transitional government, the HDS, is sort of talking about the future of Syria, is thinking about what to do next. And one thing that happened after the fall of Assad is that Israel started occupying chunks of Syrian land for security purposes. Most of it was within the sort of demilitarized zone, or basically the demilitarized zone. But some of it was also a bit further, specifically Mount Hermon, the sort of the highest place in the region. And the Netanyahu has claimed one purpose of it was the security aspects, and also because basically, for those who don't know, there was a deal between the Assad regime and not Netanyahu, but Israel, after the Yom Kippur War, about basically, what to do with the Israeli-Syrian border in the Golan Heights. And Netanyahu has said, now with the Assad gone, this deal basically falls through. But HTS is claiming, no, 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 we can renew the deal. So we'll be talking about that a little bit, as well as I didn't want to make a whole topic out of it, but also another potential hostage deal, which I think we've done a lot of episodes like that. So that's why I wanted more of as a secondary topic. And then if we have time, we can also talk a little bit about the Hezbollah, or sort of the ceasefire deal with Lebanon, but basically Hezbollah. And yeah, joining me today, welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Marco and Richard. And also let me remind people that today's episode of the reality show, as well as every episode in the month of December of the reality show, is sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. More about that later in the video, but Amazon link is in the chat and in the description. So I guess starting with the just we have a Bonnie in the chat. Are these reliable sources for statements by the leaders of HTS? My understanding is yes, for the most part. I wouldn't. I think they are still viewed as a sort of moderating force, as sort of, they've become moderated. But just a reminder, it is former Al Qaeda. So. Marco, what do you think about the idea of them saying, yeah, let's just resume the deal. Let's just go back to the deal. We'll accept it. What do you think?
Well, right now, I mean, it's such an early time, and they all um, uh, former rebel forces are still a bit not properly integrated with each other. I think one of the main priorities is to make sure that the militarized groups are laying down weapons and starting working together. So I think one of the first options, or the first priority for whatever government we're gonna see in Syria, is to make sure there is a sort of military cohesion, that there is one structure by which you can then tell effectively control the people with the weapon. You don't want to start having an internal civil war and having the group splintering left, right, and center, and then before you can say hello, you're going to have a massive civil war on your hands. So the main priorities now is to restore, create, consolidate a sort of army, and then it's obvious that at this stage the new temporary government, or whatever that is, whichever form it has, is not quite clear yet. But it's important that at the moment they don't rock the boat. That's why I think they allowed Russia to keep the bases. That's why they are allowing Israel to carry on with the agreement already in place, because you cannot afford to have so many spinning plates right now. So you just start. It's quite a sensible option, to be honest. You start leave everything in place as it was, and then you perhaps you start dealing, you start reviewing, you start looking at things. But yeah, right now it's a good thing that they recognize the deal with Israel. It's a bad thing that they leave Russia to have back their bases on the Mediterranean. It's bad that they allow Turkey a bit too much maneuvering room in the north against the Kurds. But as I said, it's still early days, and to have something in place at this point will be unreasonably fast. So you wouldn't expect them to be able to deal with more than just consolidating power now.
I think Bonnie's question is interesting, the one about reliable sources there, because to be honest, if we had the leader of HTS as our fourth panelist tonight, would he be a reliable source? Quite possibly not, because could you trust what he was saying? Could you trust what his intentions were beyond shoring up, as Marco said, the law and order, the sense of unity within the government, and of course the control of the whole of Syria, and the same would be true with Hamas when we get on to them later in the show. I mean, if you had them here, would they be a reliable source? Because at the moment, they certainly wouldn't. And at the moment, the leader of HTS, Al-Jalani, or whether you want to use his real name or not, is up to you, has yet to prove himself. All we've got at the moment is his history of being affiliated to Al-Qaeda, the fact that he's overthrown Assad, which we know is a good thing. But it doesn't mean a better thing is going to follow. It doesn't mean the kind of ideology that you want is going to exist, or even a lesser form of it. And how much of that is pragmatism anyway, as we've discussed on these shows about Syria? How much of that is the needs of the moment require him to say these things? And then when he's in a stronger position, then what? That doesn't mean he will, be Israel's worst enemy. Possibly not, and we hope not. And of course, some of what he's been saying directed at Iran, and directed in terms of using Syria as a route to supply Hezbollah and that kind of stuff is encouraging. But is he a reliable source? The jury's still out, isn't it? So that's hard to say. But what could Israel really do in that demilitarized zone that you're talking about? Once they'd abandoned their posts, once there was the threat of weaponry right on the border of Israel falling into enemy hands, what could they do except ensure some transition period by taking control of it until there is a definite sense of what the future holds? Otherwise, you've got a dangerous, porous border, which could result in your ultimate demise, to be honest. And the lessons of the past have shown fully well to Israel that it needs to act promptly when there's a vacuum on its border, and a threat of further violence. Otherwise, we've seen what happens too many times.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about reliability, and let me introduce our new special guest, Ahmed Al. No, yeah, I mean, sort of going into the potential restoration of the deal. Um, um, I think I wrote it down. Basically, the new technically upcoming leader, the leader of HTS, is taken as like a new leader of New Syria. Although it's basically there's nothing official yet because it's really hard to make sense of the transitional stuff. But it's like a de facto leader. He was arguing that Israel no longer needs to maintain these positions as the threat from Hezbollah and other Iran-backed militias has been removed with the fall of Bashar Assad's regime, which for one was a really weird, I think somewhat weird justification for it, because at least my understanding is not that Israel took, and we are not talking about Golan Heights, we are talking about the Syrian parts that Israel took over. It's not like they took over specifically because of Hezbollah or Iran, but generally these are just a bunch of rebel forces. Again, you've mentioned about the sort of the government cohesion. I mean, Israel could make any deal it wants with Lebanon, like in 2006, or accept any resolution it wants, and then you have Hezbollah just running around doing whatever they want. And in a similar way here, let's say you accept, the deal with HTS, with sort of whatever you want to call the new Syrian government. What if you have again just a bunch of rebel forces that are not affiliated or that said, okay, we no longer recognize this new thing, or we just no longer care? Or what do you do when they go out against the sort of this new Syria? Again, you have like they were not part of it. They were like a separate thing. And sort of even from the point of view of HTS, again, I don't see any reason uh, why you would want territories back. If you are, again, coming from a good place, then you just accept, okay, we are a bit unstable right now. Israel had to take it over. Let's build a free nation with, let's just take American Constitution and change a few things and maybe for the better, like put life, liberty, and property and the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's the Declaration of Independence. Just put, and in a few years, when Israel sees us that we are not only that we are not a threat, but we are, we are a potential ally. We will be another basically barrier against savagery, another barrier against barbarism coming out of these dictatorships in the Middle East. Then maybe they'll be willing to give the territory back, because it wouldn't matter. There is no longer threat between Israel and Syria. But this sort of pushing towards, now you have to give it now. Again, I think it's starting to show the first colors. Like again, I mean, imagine if after the Second World War you had like Japan saying, "Okay, can you guys get out now? I mean, come on, you've been here a bit long. No, you freaking lost. We're gonna stay here for a bit." And we eventually got out when we realized, okay, this new upcoming nations, both of Japan and West Germany specifically, they seem to be willing to accept the way it's gonna go. They are starting to adopt some of the Western values. Okay, let's don't even take any territory, just leave it all to them. They seem to be good enough to basically manage it themselves. And okay, we move on from here. And again, that's why you have. I mean, we haven't had episode about this, but there are some claims that you have part of the southern Syria, specifically the Druze communities, asking to be annexed by Israel. So again, this is not just something Israel sort of occupying parts of Syria or sort of potentially. I mean, there's no talks about annexing right now, but potentially annexing parts of Druze. Again, it shows that they want something. Some parts of Syrians want something better, and they are afraid that they will not get this from the rebels or from the new transitional Syrian government. So yeah, I don't see, if I was Netanyahu's advisor, I don't see any reason to make a deal. Let's see why they go. There is literally no reason to push towards something, because as I've said, at the end of the day, these are terrorists. This is not something just changes overnight or changes even in the few years. They've never really ruling a nation and fighting against a dictatorship are two different things. They are not remotely similar. So they need to first prove that they are able to govern a nation, and they are able to properly govern a nation. And until we see them, I don't see any, it should be just a black dot in the map for the most part. There should be nothing, no dealings with it so far. I mean, Marco, what do you think?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And also, to be fair, they didn't really fight Assad as such. The whole Assad regime collapsed because suddenly the support from Russia and Iran came, disappeared. So these guys were able to effectively drive through and make their way to Damascus. So you don't really know what these guys are capable of, what the real motivation is. And at the same time, if you were a Druze, I mean, in the south of Syria, you would be careful, because there's a group that used to be, this guy used to work for al-Baghdadi in ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I mean, they were setting up a government. So what do? You just wait until they declare, oh, actually, we're an Islamic Republic, and you stuff now. So it's quite obvious that the Druze are trying to carve themselves a way out, just in case things go not their way or our way. And of course, I mean, the other option Israel could have done is just provide lots of weapons to the Druze. But what do? You create a situation when you have a group that potentially could destabilize the area, then you end up with some sort of, skirmishes or some sort of attempts from the Druze to set up their own thing. It's like, we see in the past this kind of approach is just would so backfire. There's no even point going down the route. So Israel, the only option is to make sure that they consolidate the area so nobody moves in that particular area. And then, as Netanyahu said, as soon as there is an alternative arrangement, we withdraw. But right now, we keep an eye on things, making sure we don't get, swamped by more jihadi coming from, I don't know, Iraq or whatever, and wait and see. And until the situation is a bit more mature, until there is a government, bear in mind, as you mentioned, this guy is still considered a terrorist by the EU, the US, United States, United Kingdom. So we have to see this kind of change first, and then we can start talking about Israel giving the control back to the government of Syria. But we haven't got a government of Syria now, so that's the situation.
And no aspect of this works in isolation, does it? What this new leadership within Syria is going to do in relation to Russia and the Tartus naval base on the Mediterranean is going to reveal a great deal about their future motivation, their future plans, how they're going to deal with the Kurds in the north and the Turkish influence over the northern region of Syria. That also is going to tell us a great deal. All of these pieces are going to work together. Obviously, at the moment, it seems a bit early for countries like the UK, quite frankly, to be offering, promising, or if not actually handing over £50 million to Syria, with the stated aim that it's also going to be used to clear up the chemical weapons production areas so that doesn't happen again. But we know full well what happens when you hand over money with this must be used to pay for this written on the sheet of paper that came with it. That can be ignored by nefarious regimes if they want to, and it can be funneled into other stuff, or it can be used for something, allowing other money to be funneled into other stuff. Either way, there are many ways in which humanitarian aid or similar is, as we've covered many times, is sometimes a promoter of terrorism. In fact, frequently a promoter of terrorism within terrorist regimes, obviously, which at the moment this has got a history of being. So, or at least the form that he's come out of has been. So, it's too early to tell. I mean, we can say this a dozen different ways, but it's too bloody early to tell, isn't it? And only time will tell.
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that should sort of be the policy that the Western government should take right now. It is really too early to tell. Like it's been few weeks, if that really. Yeah, I mean, when did it happen? Yeah, it's just a few weeks, and sort of expected after at least a decade-long civil war, and not even that, because technically the civil war is not over. We still have no sort of united Syria. We still have technically, like, at the very least, at the most simplest, you have three different factions right now, and in some cases you probably have more like 5 or 6 different parts of Syria still right now that are not really united. So talking about Syria as if it's one thing is still very premature. Yeah, but sort of now going to the, I think, bigger point about dealing with terrorists is, yeah, there's no way to know what you're gonna get. So maybe starting with a second topic with another potential deal with Hamas. I mean, let's just start with a quick one point that I've read, which I found specifically pretty bad, is that senior Hamas officials, which at this point I have no idea what even means senior Hamas officials, but they are discussing the potentiality of getting Marwan Barghouti released, and basically not released to Gaza, but accepting exile, I think, to specifically Turkey. I think in some cases even Iran was discussed. and demanding mediated guarantees for Israeli compliance with the deal. I mean, this, I think this is the first time I've heard about potentially releasing Marwan Barghouti. But I mean, Marco, what do you think about this?
Honestly, I cannot believe that Israel is doing this. I cannot believe that we are legitimating, effectively legitimize Hamas in allowing them to dictate terms, to make requests, to dictate the terms for a ceasefire. I mean, they are holding the hostages. The hostages are still in Gaza after 14 months. They're still held in Gaza by the Gazans, but it's, the victims of the universe, but the people that are supposed to be so sorry about, the people that are supposed to be starving to death and suffering so much. Yeah, they're suffering so much, but they don't release the hostages and ask for a cessation of fire, do they? And I think absolutely ridiculous. It makes me so angry to think that Israel is dealing with these barbarians, with these monsters who caused October the 7th and went into Israel and took 250 hostages. I mean, this is commoditization of human lives. This is accepting that human life has got a price and that Hamas can do this over and over again. It's telling these groups, these savages, that it's fine to go into a country and take hostages because you're gonna get something in exchange. Because the other side will ask you, "Oh, what do you want for the life of the hostages back?" And I understand that if you are one of the families, or if somebody that you love is held by these barbarians, of course you would want to do something to get them back. But to come to a deal with these savages, with these monsters, because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with monsters, people who don't care about human life. They're quite happy to trade in human lives in exchange for what effectively are terrorists, people that are held in Israeli jails because they are murderers. I mean, this Barghouti guy, I mean, he was the leader of the first and second Intifada. I mean, this guy is another uber monster, um, is another probably next leader of Hamas. This guy will come back and organize another October the 7th. I mean, what's his name? The guy,
Sinwar?
Sinwar. I mean, Sinwar came out of a prison and came back and organized October the 7th. I mean, are we learning nothing at all from history?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this legitimizing of taking hostages and the idea that's spoken about in part of this deal that they'd be divided up into groups of hostages, and you have the audacity to call it a humanitarian group for the first group. If you cared about humanitarian stuff, you wouldn't have taken them hostage in the first place and held people for a year and over 2 months, would you? It's obscene to pretend that you're doing something humanitarian at this point, or even at the point you took them. It's absolutely obscene. When it comes to legitimizing the equivalence between Palestinian prisoners who are convicted criminals, such as this guy serving 5 life sentences for directing, as Mark has said, the first, second Intifada, or the bus bombings and all of the the terrorist activity that took place in the late 80s and the early 2000s. All of that is, you're just saying he's an equivalent to a group of hostages. It's vile, quite frankly. And by what standard are you legitimizing such a comparison? On what standard are you legitimizing even negotiating with them? Yeah, by the standard of might makes right, aren't you? By the standard that force can be answered with reason. And force can't be answered with reason. Force has to be answered with force, and then reason has to prevail after that. And if there were reason on both sides, there would be no force in the first place. And that's I find it despicable. But when I start looking at the details here, and I realize again we're back into what is a reliable source, because there's a lots of it could include this and it could include that, and the deal might cover this. But also, you know that how it will be interpreted, when it's particularly when they talk about this first phase business, which is a nonsense. Attempting to divide it into phases is just to allow not all the hostages to be returned. That's all having a first phase is aimed at doing. And then, of course, as soon as the IDF is compelled by agreeing to such a deal to withdraw to some extent from areas of Gaza, then already, the Hamas side are banking that achievement, and they're not doing without surrendering, without giving up on the ideal of destroying Israel, or recognizing that October the 7th was a hideous mistake and they should never have done it and would never do it again. All of that is essential to ensuring that there aren't more hostages in the future.
Yeah, and just continuing talking about Marwan Barghouti, again, he's someone, as you mentioned, one of the people behind both the first and second Intifada. I think technically he belongs to Fatah. But again, when Palestinians are asked, he is one of the most popular potential leaders of the for the Palestinian people, or for the Palestinian territories, or whatever you want to call them. And it is because of his violence and because he's so extreme. So again, it shows the fact that any sort of negotiation, any sort of willingness to accept a ceasefire deal or any sort of hostage deal will encourage more violence, will encourage more of it. They will not stop. They want someone more extreme. They will not, if you release some of the terrorists, they won't suddenly, well, okay, they released our terrorists, so now we're gonna modernize, we're gonna moderate ourselves. Um, Before I go to another part of the deal that I want to discuss, let me remind people that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. Let me read you a little bit from chapter 1, and also reminder that link is Amazon link is in the chat. So from chapter 1, in the field of money creation, ignorance is not bliss. If you know how banks create new money, you can begin to understand how the money supply grows, its source, who benefits, and who is harmed. But if, like most experts, you perceive commercial banks as mere financial intermediaries transferring money from a saver to a borrower, you won't understand their unique economic importance, nor will you know how their legal privilege to create money can work for good or ill, depending on who makes the money creation decisions. And also all proceeds from the sale of the book go towards the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK. So you can, again, find out more about money creation specifically, which is, I think, one of the least sort of general understood way of how money works in the sort of modern society. Yet it's one of the most important aspects to understand if you want to understand what's happening with your sort of stored productivity and where it goes. So again, link for that is in the chat, in the description, and in the pinned comment. And all royalties go towards support of Ayn Rand Centre UK. So you can support us, you can keep us on the air, and you can also educate yourselves in a really important thing. So now continuing a little bit more with the deal, it's yeah, I go just through the headlines and it's always the same: major concessions from Hamas, the deal is closer than ever, and it's all. And even when we talk about it, I think we almost play into it because we cover a lot of this. Deal is close, so that's why I didn't want to necessarily make it the main topic, but still, I think there is a little bit there. And so you mentioned, I think, Richard, you mentioned the sort of the phases, and the first phase is expected to include a 7-week ceasefire, and a potential, and then it would go into the second phase. But again, 7 weeks. Just imagine. I think the last one we had basically last year. I think that wasn't it like 4 days or something? I think it was just less than a week. Yeah, I mean, again, it's the same thing over and over again. By accepting this, you are allowing Hamas to survive. Not only Hamas to survive or to reorganize or whatever, but you are acknowledging that violence is okay. You are saying, yes, you can commit October 7, you can come and kill us, you can kidnap some of us, and we will negotiate with you about the release of them. I mean, Marco, when can we ever really hope or sort of think that Palestinians will change if we increasingly, every time we tell them, no, violence is okay, you can commit violence and you'll actually get more people back than we'll get back. And also, don't worry because Western governments will support you in this endeavor. They'll recognize your state and they will actually fight for you on behalf of the ceasefire deal.
I mean, if that's not a rhetorical question, you tell me. Um, I mean, it is just ludicrous. I mean, you just mentioned money creation, and money is essential for two people to trade with each other. And you use the same term, trading, this exchange of hostages and terrorists. That's not a trade. That's just effectively telling Hamas, yeah, you've done well, you've taken hostages, and now you're gonna gain out of it. Hamas is just doing this because of Trump's ultimatum. Trump told them, well, if you don't sort this out by the 20th of January, which incidentally is very close to the 7th week of the terms, isn't it? Um, there will be hell to pay. And what does Hamas do? Well, wanting to survive, as the good rats that they are, they come out of the woodwork, and well, rats don't come out of the woodwork, the worms do, but never mind. They come out of their tunnels and they start. Look at us. We're open to negotiation. We're so reasonable. We're so civilized. We trade with you. That's not trade. This is dealing with human beings, with human lives, human beings which have been held captive for 14 months. And you treating these people, you legitimize their claim, their existence, their statements by allowing them to take a seat and dictate the terms. I mean, the headlines say Hamas is showing flexibility. Oh, really? Hamas is just pulling a fast one, trying to survive. They're desperate. They know that if they don't reach a deal, either by US allowing Netanyahu to go flat out into Gaza or by doing something else, they will be wiped out. And frankly, even if any terrorist is released, I mean, short of giving them like a very slow acting poison, and then they're released after a few days, they die. That's what Israel should do. You should never release these people and allow them to live. If you release them, make sure you know where they are and then blow them up the moment their hostages are out of harm's way. This is ridiculous. Israel should never, ever deal with these people. No one should deal with these people. No one should acknowledge that these people are even human beings. They behave like animals. They're trading on human life. They do not deserve to exist. And the sooner people like this are wiped out, the sooner the West makes clear this is non-negotiable. You do not take hostages. You do not make demands on the life of somebody else. But hey, that's a kind of stupid and spineless and coward and morally blind attitude that we take in the West. And people like this take advantage of it. Ayn Rand, 70 years ago, explained the principle. Evil is powerless unless the good allows evil to survive. Evil is a parasite of the lack of action of the good. If the good side, the West, the civilized side, doesn't put a stop to it, evil will thrive. And we're seeing here, Hamas and these kind of animals are thriving, are surviving because we let them do it.
Ask yourself this: who are the heroes for the Palestinian people? Who are the popular people among the Palestinian people? They are people like Marwan Barghouti, aren't they? They are people who have killed lots of Jews. And because they've killed lots of Jews, that is why they are the hero. because they promise a future where more Jews can be killed. And if you capitulate to that, you are sanctioning it. You're actively participating in the sanctioning of the death of more Jews in the future. And he's not the only one, is he? There's the other guy, the Secretary General of the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine, who plotted the assassination of the Israeli minister, Ze'evi. Now, if you know, what are you saying there? That okay, we'll release him. You can try and assassinate our ministers in the future. Whether it's you or somebody else like you, that's fine. You're going to be released. You're going to be released because you also kidnapped some people, some completely innocent people, and in order to get them back, we have to accept that in the future more Israeli ministers are going to be assassinated. At what stage do you stop and say, no, it ends here. It ends by not capitulating at all to those evil demands. And when this particular deal is talking about the idea that these heavyweight terrorists, these basically the heroes for the Palestinian people, that the names they've heard of, that those that have been successful in killing Jews by their standard are to be exiled to, well, various countries are spoken of, but whether it's Qatar, Turkey, or Iran, each of which is, eye-poppingly stupid to say the least, you have to accept the fact that even if you release them to a different country, people are perfectly able to organize intifadas from abroad. Many of them are able to organize intifadas from within prison, for Christ's sake. So they can certainly do it within a semi-friendly or uber-friendly Iran, Turkey country across a border or two. So what does it mean? Whether they're actually in Gaza or not, whether they're actually in the West Bank or not, bears no relation to whether they represent a figurehead of heroism for the Palestinian people to rally around in the future against Israel. And if you allow that person to reach that podium, that pedestal, and you assist them in helping them up to the top of it, then you'll deserve everything that comes in the next phase of the inevitable war that will follow.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of these negotiations, when it comes to conducting a war, you have to ask yourselves first, what do I want, and also what do they want? So let's start with the second one. What do they want? What does Hamas want? What does Hezbollah want? What does Iran or the Houthis want? They want Israeli destruction. It's the specifically with Hezbollah. That's literally the reason it was founded. And with many of the others, it's a big part of their narrative right now. It's a destruction of Israel. It is, what do they call Hamas? Or they are a resistance fighter. Well, what are they resisting? They are resisting the existence of Israel. They are resisting the idea of Israel being a nation, of Israelis trying to live there. And you have to realize that any sort of negotiation with this is allowing that to persist. You are negotiating with your destruction. You are saying, let's just destroy us later. Let's just keep it for another day. It's in a similar way that life requires you to take certain actions to live. In the same way, nation defending, nation building, nation preservance requires certain actions to take. For one, destroy your enemies. Don't let someone who is actively trying to destroy you live. And by not taking these actions, by allowing Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran to persist further, you are putting like a ticking time bomb. You are putting time on how long will you actually survive as a nation. And sort of, I guess, going to the last points of this topic, that is the fundamental thing. How you deal with terrorists, and I think Richard mentioned it, you deal with them by force. You cannot reason. What did Churchill said? You cannot reason with the tiger with your head in its mouth. And this is a bit different because this is not about some strong enemy is fighting against us and it's hard to keep on. It's these puny savages are trying to destroy you and you don't have moral confidence to actually defend yourself. That is the biggest problem. As someone asked on the Daily Objective why we care, because of the this is not a material issue. This is not Israel not being able to defend itself materially. It is really Israel not having the moral confidence to recognize what it takes to have a civilized nation, to have a civilized nation that is strong and is able to defend itself, and what it takes to preserve it. I mean, Marco, any last thoughts on this
Oh,
topic?
you're totally right there. I mean, ultimately, we have to answer the question, do you think that humans are free to live as they should in a free environment, choosing what's good for them? Have they got the right to pursue their own happiness? Well, then, if the answer is yes, then you should stop any kind of threat to their lives. The Israeli government should decide, well, should an Israeli national be in fear of their life, be in fear of bombs coming their ways, be in fear of being attacked by some savages from the country next door? Or should they live in peace? Should they be able to choose how to live their life without fearing for their life? If the answer is yes, then you should absolutely remove any threat that makes this thing impossible for your own citizens, which is the proper function of government in the first place. You have to make sure the conditions are right for your people, for the people living in your state, to have the freedom to act for the pursuit of their own happiness. And this is the question we're afraid to ask, never mind to answer in the West. If you think human beings shouldn't live like slaves, if you think human life shouldn't be treated like currency, then the answer is obviously stand up to these savages. As you mentioned, puny savages. I mean, these are people who you just need to bark at them and they will just shit their pants. They are unable to stand up to a proper civilization because they are not civilized. What moves them, the motive force behind them, is the fear of a god. I mean, Jesus Christ, can we stand up to this stupidity? I mean, we have, never mind the technology, but we have a history of philosophy behind us that can stand up to those kind of ideas. But we choose to ignore it and we choose to lower ourselves down to the level and behave effectively like the animal that they are. It's just ridiculous. As I mentioned, Ayn Rand made this point 70 years ago. It's not hidden stuff. It's not written in hieroglyphics so you don't understand. It's been translated in different languages. So read Ayn Rand and read what a real nation should be, how human beings should live, and why. And you'll have your answers there. But no, we choose not to do it. We choose to hide behind ghosts and gods and ritual and those kind of malarkey. We choose irrationality as a standard of thinking. Well, that's not thinking. That's just walking out towards death. That's not choosing life. It's choosing death.
And all of this talk within the deal of things like the Philadelphia corridor, retreating to the Nazarene corridor in the middle, across the middle, that divides would divide Gaza into two sections. You need to remember, of course, the very sad and depressing fact that over 800 IDF soldiers have lost their lives in the fight to try and restore the security for Israel and in the war here. And if you then are going to restrict them to a limited section of territory where they're then going to be surrounded by people who hate them and haven't given up their ideology one iota since the first of those 800 was killed, then all you're doing is putting those IDF at risk. All you're doing is putting Israeli citizens as well at risk of more rockets firing across the border into Israeli territory for conceding to what? Conceding to the fact that you want your loved ones back, even at the price of having more loved ones taken in the future or killed in the future. And that is the sad and reality or sad reality of this. And it makes any discussion, as you said before, sometimes when we talk about all the potential, does the deal include this, that, and the other? It's legitimizing the process by running through the various points in a sense. We're not doing that. We're saying the whole thing should be ripped up at a conceptual level because to concede to it would be to condone the evil.
Yeah, and with that, let me remind people again that today's episode of the reality show has been sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. You can find more about it following the Amazon link in the chat, in the description, and in the pinned comment. Thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find us on the Briefly Objective or some of our work taken from this channel, short edited clips with extra visuals to really make the point, much of it about obviously Israel and the war going on at the moment. So please do check it out. The link's in the description below.
And check out the Substack, the ARCUK Substack, for a few articles.
And you can find more from me on my YouTube channel, Them Dan. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Bye bye.